ITX builds such as this beautiful thing right here should cost well over $1,000, especially if your end goal is to be able to play at 1440p ultra settings. But this extremely beautiful mini ITX PC right here only took $800 to put together, and the performance results from this thing are nothing short of amazing. I think it's hilarious that it wasn't even a month ago that I said, this is probably the last mini ITX build that I ever put together. And now I'm back with another fresh ITX build for you guys to enjoy. Now, why would I put myself through this torture again? Well, it's because I'm a sucker for a deal, and I found an extremely good deal for a mini ITX motherboard, CPU, and RAM combo. I just can't say no. I'm an addict. I've got a problem. And the acquisition of this motherboard, CPU, and RAM combo actually has a pretty cool story behind it, which I'll get to in a second. Now, before we get started here, I know that there's somebody out there who's like, well, just because you did it for $800, that doesn't mean I can. Stop it. Just stop it. I have a whole dedicated series to doing this exact same type of thing every single week. It's called the PC Build Up Challenge, where I build and sell gaming PCs until we've earned enough money to build the absolute Mac Daddy of gaming PCs, and then I give it to you. And we've earned $2,976 in only 17 episodes, and we started this season with $0. So yes, you can do this too. All you gotta do is make sure to keep your eyes open, and then when the opportunity presents itself, you strike when the iron's hot. So starting off this build is the motherboard, CPU, and RAM combo that I found. What we have is an ASUS Prime H610i mini ITX motherboard. We get an Intel i5-12400F CPU and 16 gigs of DDR4 RAM. Now for the RAM that I'm showing you for this build, that's not actually the RAM that came with this combo. This combo came with some RGB RAM, and I used that in last week's build because it matched that build a little bit better. And the RAM that we're using for this build is some Corsair Vengence DDR4 memory that's 32 gigs. And I'm gonna give you a little spoiler now, that was not a good idea. Now, like I said earlier, there's actually a pretty cool story that comes with the motherboard, CPU, and RAM combo in here. I was talking to the gentleman who had it listed on Facebook Marketplace. I offered him $120 for all the parts. He said yes, and then afterwards, he actually recognized who I was. And now, I'm not a very big YouTuber, at least I don't consider myself a very big YouTuber, so to be recognized by anyone, I already think is really cool. But when I went and met up with him, he asked to take a picture with me, which honestly, it made me feel like a rock star for like the rest of the day. I felt like I was famous. It was pretty cool. So if you were watching, man, you made my day. So just like all other used hardware that I purchase, I like to make sure and clean up the items as best as I can. I like everything to look as brand new as possible. Now this motherboard was not too dirty, so I just gave it a quick blast with the air duster to get the small amount of visible dust off. And then I used a rag with some isopropyl alcohol on it to remove the excess thermal paste around the CPU before moving on to the SSD. Now for most builds that I put together, I try and stick with a Gen 4 drive, but it was hard to pass up the deal that I found on this Gen 3 PNY SSD. It was on sale for $40, and that's a pretty decent deal for a 1TB M.2 NVMe. Now, if my plan was to keep this beautiful thing, which is definitely something that crossed my mind because I really like this PC, then I probably would have skipped the Gen 3 NVMe and then stuck with the Gen 4 NVMe. The savings is only like $15 for quite a bit more performance out of your SSD, but because we're selling this system to try and make a little bit of money, didn't think it was a terrible pickup to just pick up the Gen 3 NVMe. But maybe you guys feel differently. Remember, once we get closer to the end of this video, after we've tested the performance from our beautiful little $800 system here, I like to ask you guys how much we should try and sell the system for, because this is your series. It's a computer that I'm gonna be giving to you. You guys should have a say in how much I sell these computers for, and maybe you think the Gen 3 NVMe is gonna hurt how much we're gonna sell this system for. Now, the RAM that we did go for was 32 gigs of Corsair Vengence LPX RAM at 3,400 megatransfers per second. Now, like I said, this RAM was in a different system, but I flip-flopped it with the RAM that came with this deal because I thought that this RAM would look a lot better in a build that doesn't have any RGB in it. So next up is the CPU cooler. I went with this IS55 by ID Cooling. I've used this CPU cooler once in the past on a CPU that gets way hotter than a 12400F ever will, and it performed very well. So I'm 100% positive that this thing is going to have zero issues at all cooling this CPU. Now, realistically, for a 6-core 12-thread CPU that only pulls 117 watts max, I could have used a stock CPU cooler and been just fine. But if you know me at all, I'm not gonna do that. We're gonna go with an aftermarket CPU cooler every time, and I think it was a good choice to pick up this IS55 by ID Cooling. So right about now is when I ran into my one big issue with this build. Most times, off camera, when I reach this point in a build, I test the system to make sure that everything is working properly. It's just good practice. It's good practice to test it outside of the case before you go ahead, assemble everything, put it all together, and then push the power button, and nothing happens. This thing will not, in any way, shape, or form, no matter what I did, it will not post with 2 sticks of that RAM. It will post with 1 stick, so 16 gigs, but it will not at all work with 2 gigs. I've lowered the speed, I've checked out the CPU pins, everything is just fine. I tested other RAM with this, and it works just fine with that other RAM. The only problem is all the other DDR4 RAM that I have is not low profile RAM, so it will not fit with this CPU cooler. So I did go ahead and order some new RAM for this system, but it's not here yet. So what we have is 16 gigs for right now. So because a mini ITX board looks so silly in anything other than an ITX case, I went with the Fractal Terra. I have been a massive fan of this case for a very long time. It is a very clean, elegant look that I have been enjoying so much lately. And out of all the other mini ITX cases I have seen, this thing is, honestly, it's #1 in my book. So this case does have the ability to throw in an additional 120mm fan down here at the bottom, and I definitely wanted to try that out because if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I'm a sucker for huge air movement inside of my PCs, even though this case fan would really only be cooling the bottom of the power supply and the back portion of the GPU, but I did do a little stress testing at the end, and it's pretty effective, and the results might impress you if you're easily impressed, like me. So now it was time to go ahead and put our motherboard inside of our case. Mini ITX boards only have 4 screws, so it's pretty hard to mess that up, even though I absolutely made a mistake by not plugging in my CPU power first, so I had to take the board back out so I could plug in that cable, and then I could reattach the board. Honestly, that's the only mistake that I made during the entire build process of this computer right here, the Johnsbow build. I messed up like 6 times. Drove me nuts putting that thing together. Way easier to build in this thing. So for the power in this system, I picked up this 850 watt SFX power supply by Vitro. Look how cute it is. This thing is adorable. This is a fully modular 80+ gold power supply and it had real good reviews, so hopefully this tiny thing can keep up with the graphics card I picked up for this build. And to talk about that graphics card, I figured I'd just throw it back to a previous version of me. Thanks a whole lot, future me. So obviously, we're building on a budget here, but that does not mean we're gonna settle for a graphics card that's not gonna give us some serious performance. I mean, we are trying to get some extremely powerful gameplay from this little system here, so we're gonna need a graphics card that's gonna be able to keep up with us. Now, luckily for us, GPU prices have started to level off and they're not so crazy anymore now that, you know, some of the big beefy brand new cards are readily available. So I think that for this build, the perfect GPU would be this EVGA 3080 that I was able to pick up for only $300. And I think it's gonna pair pretty well with the 12400F CPU that's inside of this system. Well, back to you, future me. Oh crap, you guys are already back? Jeez, that was fast. All right, well, now that he showed you what graphics card we are using, let's throw it in here. Take a good look at this thing. So let's go over some gameplay of our little beast here so that you guys can help me come up with a list price on how much we're gonna try and sell this thing for. So I lined up 6 games to take a look at. I tested each one of them at their max graphical settings and at 1440p. Starting off with Marvel Rivals with the world's worst team luck, we were getting a beautiful average of 74 FPS. Testing something a little bit different, I played Predecessor, getting an absolutely gorgeous 121 FPS. In Horizon Zero Dawn, with a fully maxed out system, we're pushing out a beautiful average of 73 FPS. In Helldivers, while killing what appears to be zombies now, not sure when they introduced that into the game, but we're getting an average of 75 FPS. In God of War Ragnarok, one of my favorite games of all time, I got a chance to realize just how rusty I am at this game, but I got to see it at a solid 86 FPS average. And lastly, in Doom the Dark Ages, at the game's Ultra Nightmare preset, we're getting a very respectable 66 FPS average. Now, as you will have probably noticed, I do not throw in games that are going to get like wild FPS numbers. I don't like it when I see a thumbnail that says like 300 plus FPS. Yeah, you're doing that in Fortnite performance mode. My air fryer gets 60 FPS in Fortnite performance mode. I want to test difficult games, and I want to test difficult games at their maximum preset. Now remember earlier I did say I wanted to test the cooling potential from the additional 120mm fan that I put inside of here. Now I did set that fan to ramp up with the graphics card as the graphics card began to get hot. Now in benchmarking, that GPU hit 79 degrees Celsius, and if I turned that fan off, the max GPU temperature hit 81. So it is doing something to assist in cooling the GPU, while doing absolutely nothing for cooling CPU temperatures, which only ever hit a max temperature of 65 degrees. So now's the part of the video where you guys come in. I'm gonna need your help coming up with a list price for this system. Now the total build cost to put this thing together came out to $803, which is going to decrease the amount of money that we have to build your system to $2,173, which is still an extremely good amount of money for only flipping 18 computers, but we still have to sell this system. So I need you guys to run down to the comments and let me know what you guys think a fair list price for this PC would be. Every single week, so many of you guys chime in to let me know what your thoughts are. I take all of that into consideration. I come up with an average price that you guys set, and that's what I list the PC for. And let me tell you, you guys know what you're talking about, because these things have been selling like crazy. Now, if you would like a chance at taking home the PC we are working hard to build, then you're gonna need to be a part of the PC Rehab Discord server. I have a link in the description down below. You are going to need to be a member of that Discord in order to qualify. Now, if you had a little bit of fun here with me today, please consider hitting the subscribe button. I love making new friends, and if you'd like to be a friend with benefits, consider joining the channel's membership program. God, that sounds so creepy. But remember that no matter where you are in the world, I hope that you are having the most fantastic day, and I'm gonna see you right here for the next video.